started when I was 6 years old with my music and my art, and I started singing in church when I was 15, and I was getting pretty good then. But every church we ever went to, I did a tap on the shoulder, and they said, somebody said you play the piano. Well, yeah, try. You want to come and be our pianist? And they hadn't heard me play, so they figured I must have been good enough. So that's the way it was all the while I was married to, and played the piano whenever, or organ in every church we ever went to. So I was very busy, playing piano and the organ.
His whole life was music. Every morning he would say, well, the hymn of the day is, or another famous work. When he woke up, it was in his head.
It's got a good beat to it, and it's got a melody to it, which this later music don't have.
And I guess I like the words too.
Yeah,
to a lot of
stories to the song.
I think a lot of the older music was all about love and faith.
But then you get into country music, and that's usually sad stories. It's about divorce and partners dying, things like that.
They had a lot of meaning to them, and
well, the early rock and roll, that's pretty good music. At the time it came out, older people didn't like it. But now that's getting where the older people grew up with it and they're enjoying it. There's some like Roy Orbison, Buddy Holly, some of those, they enjoy those songs. So younger people, they won't even listen to them. But
my aunt could play music by ear. We'd sit by the pianos and she'd play away and we'd sing. And my mother loved to sing too, and my brother and I. My dad couldn't carry a tune in a bushel basket, but he would sing.
I feel that my music ability really came from my dad. My mother loved music too, and she could play the piano and that too, but my dad played the harmonica. And he'd always have us kids and our children and everything, put them on his knee, and he'd sit down and play the harmonica and sing You Are My Sunshine and all these different kinds of things. So my dad was, I think, my instigator for pushing me for music. I started learning by ear. Dad says, no, you're going to take lessons. You're going to learn how to play by note and that. And of course, I suppose that's what encouraged me. And
I started with coloring a comic. It was a popular thing back when I was in high school. My mother really appreciated my art. She furnished me with scroll paper that I painted on and sent it into the art exhibit. They said I could come and do artwork. I told her better to stay home.
And I took up the accordion after I retired, so I never played that when I was a kid. He had one when we first got married and decided that nobody played it or anything, so he had a cousin that wanted it, and so we sold it to him, which was a mistake, but that's the way it goes. I just enjoy the accordion. And
you were with the accordion group playing for polka services for a few years too.
There were 4 of us that played for polka services. There's still 2 of us that are left that will go out and play for polka services. We've lost some of them through passing on or something like that.
I was glad to get that accordion back up here. It was been down in the basement ever since I moved here. But Jim used to take me in our parking spots and serenade me with accordion and kind of waltzes and polkas and stuff like that. He never wanted anybody to hear him playing except me. He'd be sitting downstairs in his shop, and when somebody came, then he'd quit. I don't know if he thought he couldn't play good enough for it, but he could play. He bought that in, what was it, 1951, I think. He paid $110 for it.
I tried many instruments, but I could not get the hang of it to do a decent job. So finally gave up and let her do all the music playing. I love to listen to music.
And that helps a lot because he always goes with me. He's my moral support, so.
I took piano lessons But this was back when it was difficult to get piano lessons, so I didn't get very far. And then my sister had taken lessons in what was called the American School of Music. It was a correspondence course. And she would send in her lessons and they would grade them and send them back. And so she started about at 20 or so. And they said, well, if when I got to that old, I could pick up lessons from that school too, which I did. But it was pretty haphazard. I went to a neighbor, a lady, I walked over to the farm, you know. But then when I was a sophomore in high school, the pastor came to me and said, you're going to have to play for church, because the organist was getting married. And she was an old maid. This was quite a surprise. I said, Reverend Reber, I can't even play a hymn. And he said, well, you're going to have to learn. I'll give you the numbers on Monday and you'll have all week to practice. And so that's how I started being a church organist. And this was an old pump organ in our country church, but I did it. And that was a very delightful experience.
It's a stress reliever, and it just makes you feel good. I can get rid of all my frustrations with my music. It's just peaceful.
When I started school, I had 2.5 miles to go, to walk or ride if I was lucky. But in the wintertime, of course, my dad would take me. But in order to take me, he had to hitch up the horse to the car to start the car. We go out the lot, drive down probably 1/2 mile, and by that time the car would start. So he'd unhitch the horse would go home, and he'd take me to school and go back home again. This happened daily, practically, in the wintertime. So,
he started it, put it in gear, told it to take him home. Put him in the ditch is what it did. You know, it went, but it put him in the ditch. The horse would take him home, but the car put him in the ditch. So that was it. He never did drive the car. My dad used to love to tell that story about it, because that was his grandpa, you know, my dad. And my great-grandpa never drove the car because the car put him in the ditch and wouldn't take him home like the horse did, so the heck with it. He wasn't driving the car anymore. So
every year the gypsies would come, and the town really accepted them in, and us kids were fascinated by them. If they were strangers, we were scared of them because Grandma would always say they'll kidnap you and you know, that sort of thing. They'd weave stuff out of willow trees, you know, and then walk around town all over the whole community and sell those baskets and flower pots. That was interesting.
But when my dad had a roller skating rink too, and of course I roller skated I had to keep up with my brothers and sisters, so we skated all over town. Anytime we went someplace, we put on our roller skates and went. So that's how I learned to roller skate. And then after that, my dad would always take me to the rink, and then he taught me how to waltz on skates and everything. Wow. So we had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with my dad.
Well, my dad used to go fishing after noon lunch, and we'd go up at East Lost Lake and catch fish, and we had fish for supper. We always caught some. Mom used to make, I call it rummagut, but she called it grut. It was just milk and flour, and that was a lot of times our supper. And then sometimes she made homemade bread, and then we'd have thick cream on it and sugar.
My younger sister Carol, she was just a baby. She was wrapped up a blanket on the front seat of the old 47 Chevy, and bench seats, right? She's laying on the front seat, and I'm in the back seat. Mom stops at the store and tells me, now don't get out of the car, stay with your sister, I'm going to run and get some milk or something. So she dashes into the store. But meanwhile, my sister pooped, and it stunk so bad. So I crawled up in the front seat, and I opened the door, because I was going to go get my mom. And then I remembered, she said, no, don't you leave the car. You stay with your sister. I thought, well. So I pulled it shut. I didn't pull it shut tight enough. And Mom gets back in the car, and Carol's still laying there on the front seat, and I'm in the back seat, and Mom pulls out. The door flies open. My sister flies out. I'll never forget the look on my mother's face as she looked back in horror to see her child laying in the street. And it was a God moment. Standing right on that sidewalk was a cop, and he ran out and picked her up. And she only had a little bruise on her head.
And our mothers would have somebody fixing their hair. And my cousin Bernice and I figured it out how to cook flaxseed, and just cook it in water till it makes a syrup. And then when it's cool, it's like syrup, or like stuff to put in your hair. And we would put that in our hair and wave it, and whatever we wanted to do with our hair.
And then we'd go to a movie sometimes for something special. We had 2 theaters in town, so that was an extra event.
My brother got married when I was 6 years old, and he ended up joining the Navy when I was about 8 or something like that, and then moved and never came back. He raised his family and stuff in California, so I didn't know him real well. Although when I was a child, he would push me in the swing. I can remember that, and riding on the manure spreader out to spread the manure in the fields and that kind of thing. But he always teased me. He was always going to put me in a box and ship me off to Norway.
You would say I had an interesting life because I did a lot of traveling with my husband. We had a 35 rig, and we traveled all over the country. So I've had an interesting life. So we were able to travel to Europe, and then to never do it because we didn't have time.
We lived in a slower time. We got our first TV, and it was black and white, and we were just thrilled. The whole neighborhood would be watching our little black and white TV, and you really did have a very neighborhood atmosphere, neighborhood watch, and you just came to your neighbor's rescue and helped out in any way you could, and that's just the way it was.
We went on the Queen Elizabeth ship over. It took us 5 days to get to France. Lovely ship, of course, and quite a few people on it too. But they just offered so much, and we did see a lot. We felt what we learned from over there, seeing all the wonderful museums and the buildings, has made us so much more aware of things wherever we go.
I had an elderly aunt who was in her 90s. She never had any children. She was my mother's youngest sister, and she sort of looked at me as a son, I guess. So she and her husband had migrated from Ohio to Alabama, and that's where you hear this drawl coming from. But anyway, she needed help, so I retired from the school system and went down there. One afternoon we were, now this is what they tell me because I don't know, that a tornado hit us and she didn't survive. But I don't have any recollection whatsoever of anything just prior to that tornado until October of last year. So there's about 5 years in there that's just blank. But I don't mind that. I can't do anything about that. That was yesterday, so I don't worry about it. But, even with the losses, which many people have had many more, I have been very fortunate because every time something happened, there was somebody there to sort of take over, you know, or take care of you, if you want to say it that way. I really have been blessed, you know, and it's been a great life.
I remember the Depression, how tough it was. The first Christmas, when it was really bad, I was probably 4, and there wasn't any money for Christmas presents. And I remember my mother taking me and my brother up to the bathroom. Our Christmas presents were each a colored washcloth and a colored bar of soap. And I was delighted. But I remember the sad look on her face, how sad she felt that that's all that she could give us for Christmas.
I wanted to go to college, and I didn't have the money. And my mother and father had died when I was 2. And my maternal grandparents raised me. And they were in their 70s when a little 2-year-old toddler came to live with them. My grandfather died on my 8th birthday. And then it was just my grandmother and me. But we stayed together until I graduated from high school. And some people talked to me and they said, well, I know one way you can go. You know, you can talk to the military and see, because they'll pay for you. So anyway, I wound up joining the Air Force in 1951 because I graduated in 50. And I said, okay, I'll do my 4 years and get out. Well, I wound up doing 22.
Well, you see, the war time that I grew up in was in like 42 or just before that. When I was in high school, every day we'd have bulletins on what was happening. They'd have to post it, you know, to tell us where the army was and where it was happening. So in the 40s, everybody knew about food stamps. They worked. If you wanted to eat, you had a place to go to, you know, that handled them. Then you would go there and get food stamps for the month there.
So high school, that was during the war, World War II. I remember when my brother was bringing us home from Sunday school, which was a half a mile away, and he said the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor. And that was in December of 41. And so then that changed the whole picture for everything, you know. But I remember all those things. And then when I graduated from high school, the war was over. And the servicemen were coming back to college. And I started in 45.
I remember in high school, we didn't bring our lunch always to school, but they would announce that today is Apple Day. That meant that we could go down to where they served food and we could get a free apple, you know, or maybe the next day it would be soup, and there would be different things each day. The government was providing enough food to feed a certain number of people, so we benefited from that.
So then he was in service. Then he was in Colorado Springs. He didn't go overseas. I guess he was a cook in the kitchen. I have no idea what kind of food. That was for all the ones that were there.
But we weren't allowed to go into Saigon. It's Ho Chi Minh City now. and that's where I was located at the air base there at Ton Sanut. And we weren't allowed to go into Saigon unless we were with the military escort. And I don't know that it was the first time, but I had to take some classified information to the embassy. And so we had to go downtown for that. But the Vietnamese driver, he could speak some English, and we could communicate. But we stopped at a intersection, traffic-wise, and there was like alleys going in. And the people were just, almost stacked on top of each other. Homeless, no place to go, and build what little bit of cover they could. And there was this young woman, I say young, and I looked down and saw her, because we had stopped, like I said, for traffic, and she was nursing a baby. And she put the baby down and picked up this little pig, and it nursed from her. Well, that just sent me, I didn't know, I'm sure, gaping with my mouth. And I asked the driver, I said, what in the world? And he said, well, more than likely, she sold a teenage daughter to that pig. And if she can get that pig to put on maybe 10 or 12 pounds or so, he says she can get enough money to feed the rest of her family probably for a year. And he says that's what these people have to make a decision about, And it was just really bad. And I think of, if I think I've got a problem, I just think about something like that, And I think it's made me a better person from a humanistic point of view than had I not gone and seen some of the things.
So, just before the war started, there was a kind of a thing where young boys could sign up and go up in the woods, cut timber, and do things under the government. They got $1 a day to work there and their room and board. So my husband went there for a month or two just to show that he had served somewhat,
Anyway, when they got over to Japan, he got pulled out of the pipeline. They were setting him right to the front. But because of his music background, he got pulled out. What can you do? And 4 of these fellows, another one was a teacher, and they had thought ahead, and so they had prepared a barbershop number showing what they could do. And the 4 of them got put into this musical show. And so that's what he did while he was in Japan and Korea.
I went in service, Marine Corps in 1957, and then I never got a tattoo, so a guy told me, he said, Marine's got to have a tattoo, so in 1970 I got a tattoo, a guy paid for it. This is the Marine Corps motto, the bulldog. My oldest brother was in the Army in Korea, and then my other brother was over in Korea too, and he was in the Navy. And then the next brother was in Airborne, Army Airborne, and I was in the Marine Corps, and my youngest brother was in the Air Force, all in a different branch of the service.
I've been blessed, even though I, along with so many others, have had some hardships and some heartaches, but, they heal. And You just have to let it go sometime and quit trying to hang on to it, because you're hanging on to it and complaining about it to yourself and saying why. I mean, it stays and it gets worse. You make it worse that way. And you say, hey, that's happened. There's nothing I could do about it. So the man upstairs will handle that. So that's the way it is. Like, I just try not to dwell on things that I can't improve. And if there's something that I know I can't do anything about, and the more I try, it's going to make it even, I just forget it. If you can't improve on it, then leave it alone. Say like your grandfather used to tell you, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, you know.
If you can't say something positive or helpful, don't say anything at all.
Oh yeah, positive mindset, definitely. Always. I always kind of felt sorry for myself because I was so alone as a child, but my life has been wonderful, really. Spend time with your kids. I guess that was important to us. Live one day at a time.
And every phase in our life has been good. You know, there's good and bad in every stage of your life. I don't think I'd want to go back. We can be a little bit more laid back now at this age. If we want to be, we don't have to take on so many things that can't just sit down and smell the roses, you know.
I've had a long life, but I worked hard. I have worked every step of the way.
And that's a big thing with anything, if you just have a good attitude about it.
When he got salesman, he trained a lot of fellows, and this one fellow was kind of wearing shabby clothes, and he says, don't you think you should dress up a little bit? He says, well, if I look like I need some help, why they'll probably buy more from me. He goes, did you ever think if you looked nice, you'd look like you were more prosperous? And he dressed up then.
Mary Queen of Scots, Mary Stuart, wrote a collect, and in that she says, leave off fault finding. And unless you're helping somebody, leave off the fault finding. Let us not forget to be kind. And those two are separate. You can't be finding fault with people and being kind. And so that's my mantra. And judge not. Not our job to judge people. What are we supposed to do? Love. So there are two important words. Love one another and judge not.
It's so vivid in my mind. We were standing in the garage. I remember exactly where we were when he was telling me this. And, you know, I had a very respectful fear of my father. And so when he spoke to me about, and I lied about leaving the saw out and it got rusty, he knew I was lying. He knew I did it. He probably saw me up there sawing. And so he just pursued it and said, you know, if you tell a lie, you're going to have to remember what the lie was, because when it comes up again, you're going to have to tell the same lie. And if you can't remember, then you tell another lie to cover up that lie. And after a while, you've built up so many lies, you don't know what the truth is. I make it a practice to tell the truth. Then you don't have to remember your lies. And in this day and age of alternative fact and everything like that, I think it's so important. I've told my kids time and time again, I can handle the truth, but if you lie to me, I said, you've lost my trust, and I'll probably doubt everything you tell me from then on out. So it's important. I can handle the truth and I'll support you. We'll get through it, but don't lie to me.
You do have to just learn how to forgive each other or everything that's going on in the world. You have to try to overlook some of it and not take it all to heart. You learn a lot of patience over the years. There's a lot of things that you don't like to see happening, but times do change. And I'm sure our parents said the same things when we were growing up, that they had to learn to accept some of the things that the younger generation wanted to accept.
You gotta give some if you take some, so.
I've always felt that sometimes it may seem like you're giving up something if you are doing something for someone else and maybe depriving yourself because of it, but it usually comes back to you more so than what you gave. But it's been a good life. It really has. I wouldn't trade it because I don't think I could find anything better.
Trudge along. Keep on trudging. Oh, and do the best I can. You know.
The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. When I awoke, dear, I was mistaken, so I hung my head and cried.
I wrote my memoirs about 10 years ago, not expecting that I was going to live this long.
My grandpa was 99. He always said he was going to make 100, and he died in January, and he would have been 100 in February. He didn't quite make it. I come from a line of older ones, so we'll see how long I manage. Age-wise never bothered me. I turned 20 and 30, and a lot of people, they turn these ages and they get... But when I turned 70, I thought, there is an end to this. It is coming to it. So I just live each day as it comes. I just take each day and for what it is and just thank the good Lord for every day that it gives me.
Things don't always work out the way you expect. My husband died 5 years ago, and here am I, still here without him. And you think you cannot live, that the world has ended. But my first grandchild was going to be born 2 months later. And when he was born, why, it was a whole new world. If that grandchild had not come then, I don't know who I would be. I might be an angry, sad, bitter old woman. I don't know. But life goes on, whether you like it or not.
I just think about the different things I can't do anymore. And I guess I think about the family and what they will be like after I'm not here, I won't be here to enjoy some of the things that I'd like to and, that type of thing. But I guess I don't fear getting old because I know it's inevitable. And I don't really worry about it too much.
Until finally we saw the heart stop and we knew he was gone. So we had no regrets. I couldn't really cry because there was nothing to cry about. To prolong his life in pain or in suffering, that was not an option. And that's what we were doing. He was being mortal.
I guess you have to plan to live longer than you might think that you would. I never expected to be this long, this old.
62 years when he died. So that was a long time. We had a good marriage. I've had a good life. Yeah, it's fun thinking back on all those things.
Yeah, it's been a good life, and I just hate to look out and see some of these poor people that just can't seem to make it, hardly, and I think, oh, and you just want to say, Lord, why don't you give me that problem and let them have mine, but it's not my decision. He does what he thinks is best, and I'm glad he's making the decisions, not me.
Well, my faith in God is a big thing, you know. If I put my life in His hands and say, if this is the end of it, this is the end of it. If it isn't, I always think to myself, well, there must be something more I'm supposed to be doing because I'm still here. Leave it to the good Lord, and when He thinks it's time, it'll be time. And as long as He keeps me going, then that's the way it is.
And my dad was sick, and well, my dad died, I think, 2 weeks before we got married. So
he was talking to me in a whisper, and his final words were, "Thank you for the years of love."
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
I married him, and I knew he was a farmer. My dad was a farmer. You know, just about everybody had to be a farmer at some time or another.
And most of our, time was spent doing things on the farm. Otherwise I didn't take part in a lot of school activities. Neither did my brother because of the farm. And both my brother and I were in 4-H, and we had animals, and of course we milked cows, had pigs and chickens and ducks and geese and all that kind of stuff. The only thing we didn't have was sheep. My father would not have sheep. Our neighbors had sheep, and they go out of the fence and get into his grain field, and he didn't like that. So no way would we have sheep. We couldn't have sheep. We had everything else on the farm, but no sheep.
I had the animals. I had more fun with them than anything. I always had lambs as pets, and to play a game, we'd run around the house as fast as I could, and then they'd follow me and holler. Well, they didn't say much, they just followed me, and I'd get ahead of them a little bit, and then I'd run in the house, and they'd keep going around. Pretty soon they'd stand out there and complain, and I'd go out again. Well, that was part of my entertainment. One time, I don't know, we found an egg, and a duck hatched from that egg under an old hen, and that was another one of my pets. And my dad built a short fence, 6-8 inches, and I had that duck and would put him in the fence to keep him there, and then I ended up playing another game with him. I'd jump over the fence and run across the spot and jump over the other side, and then the duck would go back and forth. It was another one of these silly games. But one time there was an accident, I stepped on him and killed him.
Our cows, we had them so tame, you could milk them outside. We did all our milking by hand. And here in the morning when it come to milk, the cows would be dry, no milk in them. Well, who got to blame but the gypsies, The gypsies been up there again, stealing milk. So him and my brother, older brother, then sat up one night. Who should come and milk our cows but the neighbor. The neighbor who we knew real good.
So my husband, who never intended to farm, started milking cows. We had 16 cows. That's just a game for serious dairy farmers, but he didn't have big equipment, and he loved doing it and was so proud of the clean product that he turned out. And they test your milk, and depending upon how clean it is, it either goes to milk or it's made into cheese if it's not quite up to snuff. So his was always milk.
We had gotten a tractor when I was about 8. Yeah, it was 8 when we got the tractor. And of course, I learned how to drive the tractor right away. And then by 10, I was driving the pickup from the field in and out. But then everybody was gone, so I ended up helping my dad in the field, either driving tractor or riding the binder or hauling stuff in from the field. And actually, I can't believe it, but I was hauling grain to town when I was 12 years old. And I was just a little kid. I wasn't like I am now. And I'd have a couple pillows behind me and one under me so I could reach the pedals on the pickup. Of course, that was a stick shift. It wasn't like it is now. You had to use the clutch and this kind of things. Parents needed help, and I could do it. My mother didn't like to drive, so she would ride with me. And my treat for doing that was an ice cream cone.
People who had owned this farm were named Cabbage. We didn't know. We just thought it was that people raised a lot of cabbage. We lived on the cabbage farm.
My grandfather had a little farm. Well, he farmed with my mother's oldest sister's husband. My grandfather got to where he just couldn't do anything, and he wouldn't use a tractor. In fact, they didn't have tractors until I wasn't a teenager yet, but I know when his son-in-law bought one, and he came with it to the house to get something. And I remember my grandmother standing there with her hands on her hips, and she says, "What in the world are you going to do with that tricycle?" Because it had those two little wheels right in the front. He said, "Well, that's what Max got to plow with." And she said, "Are you going?" He says, "No, I'm still going to use my mules," because he said, "I like that." But and then we're talking about like 1935, 36, somewhere along that, you know. That, and my grandmother was German, of course. As the tales go, it's always kind of pretty true because she ran the household. You didn't mess with Mama, so to speak.
And I'd help my mom get her luncheons and dinners because they had big dinners, you know, because they had the whole farm bunch, the whole thrashing crew came in to eat. So you maybe had 10, 12 extra people. And they had a lunch at morning. About 10 o'clock, you had to take lunch out to them. They didn't come in for that. You had to take it out. At noon, they'd have a come sit down dinner because they're hungry, you know, they're working hard. And so then later on in the evening, usually that's when they kind of cut it down. It's like maybe about 4 or 5 o'clock. So then they had another big meal, a sit-down meal. They had different kinds of meat, like pork roast, beef roast, and I guess even chicken. And then, of course, they had their potatoes. Everybody had to have potatoes and gravy, you know, because that's a must with farmers. We had vegetable, and of course, they always had dessert of some kind. Pie seemed to be the main one they had. We had all kinds. They had lemon, they had apple. I think apple probably was the most favorite with the guys, though. And I guess they had banana.
But at the time when they were harvesting, and they had several men that they had to make lunches for morning and afternoon, Dad would always go to town and buy lots of bakery bread. You know, that stuff you squeeze and it goes flat. But it was just a real joy for we kids to have some jam put on the boughten bread or you know, some cold meat. Oh. And then, of course, the big thing when you live on a farm, you usually have to go into town to get your groceries and things, and Saturday was our day for that. And late afternoon, we'd go in and buy groceries, and I think they already had the Sunday paper, I call it the Sunday paper, that had the comics in it. And we would get an edition of that and be able to have that. And then the treat was always an ice cream cone when we went. No Dairy Queens. Well, there was ice cream shops, and that's what we would go to. They were on Main Street, and of course that was a fun thing.
I grew up on a farm, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, there was 9 of us kids. I was the youngest, and I'm the only one left. I can remember when I worked for Ole, I had to cook for trashers, and my mom came over and helped me, and I served them lunch by myself in the afternoon, and morning too, they had morning coffee.
I was born in the country and my home is burned down. See, I was 6 years old when my mother got sick, and from that time on that I didn't have a home, and I went to my uncle's for 1 year, and then I went to the other one for years and years. We never got together again with my sisters. I had to work for my living because my aunt sat me down when I got there, and she said, "This isn't your home, but you have to work for your living." And I did work. I milked cows, and I did hay. I didn't do much in the house, but outside. And the way I was brought up, I worked hard all my life. I never had much. I worked in picking chickens. That was my first job. I worked for wages, 43 cents an hour. And then I could make more than that because I was a fast worker. So I did. Then I raised my children. I worked at different jobs. I worked in the hardware store, in a clothing store. Well, I worked all my life.
Eyes of blue, but oh, what those 5 foot would do. Has anybody seen my gal? Turned up nose, turned down hole, never had no other beau. Has anybody seen my girl? Well, we met on a blind date. One of my closest friends, in fact, we went to school all 12 years together. We're still friends. And she says, "Oh, I've got this neat guy that you've got to meet." Well, I said, she'd asked me and asked me and asked me to go, and I said, finally, I think I should just wear me down. And I finally said, okay. But it was on a Lenten evening, and I was a church organist, so I had to play for Lent services. They had come into town for a concert at the high school, and I said, okay, we'll meet them there. Well, I had a severe headache. And Dad said, "Are you sure you want to go there?" I said, "Yeah, but I promised I better go." So I went and I met him. We went out for coffee, and I guess it's been history ever since.
First time I met him, and he came in with his mother. He was already in the service, but he hadn't gone overseas yet. He winked at me, and I blushed. And he thought, well, she must be a good girl. And he says, "How do you know you don't love me? Because you don't know me yet."
And a friend of mine said she had been invited to a party, and did I want to go? I said, sure. So we went, and I met my husband, my future husband, and, well, I thought he was just gorgeous. But we really spent the evening together, either talking or dancing. And at some point, he was talking about a French author. And he said, the 18th century French author. And I corrected him. I said, actually, that was a 17th century author. And later he told me that he was impressed, not just that I knew that it was 17th century, but that I would correct him. I was so lucky in my life to have him for my husband.
Yeah, it's interesting how we met. My younger brother and I drove up here on a Wednesday night just to check around a little bit. I suppose I was probably 18, I guess. And there was a big crowd across the street, and I asked the guy, I said, "What's going on over there?" And he said, "Well, there's a Sons of Norway dance upstairs that starts pretty quick." So I said to Orv, I said, "Should we go up there for a little bit?" And I said, well, I have to be back for work at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, well, yeah, he said, we can do that. So we went up there, and these two gals were dancing together. And I said, I'll dance with the one with the dark hair if she will. So we went over there, and yeah, they agreed to. And I was totally unprepared for how pretty she was. And so we danced a little bit and talked about stuff. And then I left early because I had to get a little nap. But the next Wednesday, I got off at noon, and she worked at the penny store in town here. So I cleaned up, and about 20 after 5, I walked into the store, and everybody was looking, what are you doing? We're going to close up, Well, I walked back to her department, and I said, you remember me? And she said, yeah. What can I help you with? She said. And I said, well, I just thought I'd come and see if you wanted to go out for dinner, I said. You don't have to make up your mind right away, but I'm parked right out front, I said. It's a green Buick, and I'll be standing by the front fender, I told her. Well, she come out, and we talked a while before. I suppose she wondered what kind of a nut I was, but anyways, then we drove out to the airport out here, because there was a Skyline Cafe out there. It was a steakhouse, actually, and we went in and sat down, and they wanted to know if we wanted anything to drink, and I said, just water for me, and that's all she wanted. So, but we had steaks, and they were $3.75 a piece. And of course, this was 1949, so that was probably spendy for what the wages we made those days. And the gal come over, and she said, are you newlyweds? And I said, we've only known each other for about 3 hours. But we sat there and talked till they closed the place up. So then that's how the thing got going.
See, I didn't have a car at first. So they was going to take me to Fergus, and we was going to get a car. So my uncle went with. He helped me look for a car, and my mom and dad, they took their car and went back home after we got through looking. And my uncle, he had a bad habit of always pulling out all your gears, or whatever to see what they would do. Well, he did that one time too many, and the car flooded. So there we sat. We couldn't even get home. We sat there, I must have been for about an hour or two, and then we finally got the car going, and we went home. And well, my husband I wasn't even going with him at that time, but anyhow, he was there, and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law were there. My sister-in-law, she wanted me to get him, I don't know, she wanted me to dress in black because I guess he liked black. So she dressed me up. So we went home that way, and so then we started going together.
Laverne and I would be driving up and down, that was a pastime at that time, back and forth, with our radios going, of course, eyeballing the streets. Well, there was a couple of girls that liked to walk the streets too. One of them had a striped pants on, and we picked them up.
That was it.
That was it.
And she would not wear bought clothes. Her mother had to make everything for her. She was a terrific seamstress. Yeah, she was quite a girl.
Well, we were in high school. We had a day where we could pick a job and work. So I said I'd like to be a ticket seller at the theater. And Jerry was assistant manager there. And I was in the place, where I was selling tickets. And every time the boss was upstairs and he'd call down Jerry, we'd both come out. And he did that for so long, and we just giggled about it. And finally, Jerry said one day, can I walk you home? So then that started. So he walked me home. And from then on, he used to walk me home every night. So that's how it got going.
So I met him on a blind date. I got married when I was 17. Didn't know any better.
Well, we went to the same church together, and I didn't really know him, but I knew his sister. Then after I was out of high school, I kind of met him through a post-rural youth group that we had, and we started going together there. It's not too dramatic, other than the fact that we got married after he'd been in the service for 9 months, and 3 days after we were married, he went to Germany. He was there 5 months, and then I joined him over there. And so I figured, I always tell everybody I had a 2-year honeymoon. A little late, but I did.
When my husband asked me to marry him, and he didn't say anything except, "Will you marry me?" And, well, I said, "I suppose we'd have to discuss some things before we get married." And, well, anyway, I said to him, "Well, I will not go in the barn and milk cows, and I'm not going up in the pasture and search for the cattle and all that stuff." I said, I'm a homemaker, but I'm not going to do that stuff. And he looked at me and said, "But can you bake bread?" I said, "Yes, I can bake bread. You have eaten some of my bread." He liked to have his bread.
Well, I meet him through my girlfriend. She was going with him, and she came up to my house when I was 14 years old then. And she came with Jim, and she had another guy she wanted me to go with, because Mother wouldn't let me go out then. So, but then I think we met again for the first time. I was at the fair, and he was there, and we rode on the Ferris wheel together.
I had prayed for a husband, nothing in sight, and I wouldn't even have thought of him as a possibility because he was this older man and classy, sophisticated senior. But we were in classes together. We were in a classroom that was part of the heating plant, and the wind was rattling a door, and he noticed that I was the one that got up and put a chair against the door to stop the rattling. He noticed that, and he thought, "Oh, that's a take charge person." Senior skip day, he called and asked me to go on a picnic with his friend, a double date. Well, I hadn't done my hair. I looked terrible. And I almost said no, because I thought if he sees me this way, he'll never ask me again. But then I realized if I said no, he'd never ask me again either. So we went, and that was our first date.
My first husband was a good friend of my brother's, and that's how I met him. We were together, and then he went into service, and we started writing back and forth. And then after when he came home, then we got engaged. But my second husband, he played in a dance band, and my first husband and I, we used to go a lot to their dances and things, so I knew who he was. And of course, after, I always tell the story of I had gone to choir practice one evening, and I left there, and I thought, well, I'll stop at the VFW for a little bit. And I thought, no, I think I'll go to the Eagles and see if Marvin's there. And why this hit me right then, I'm not sure. But I walked into the Eagles, and he was sitting playing tickets and stuff with another guy. I sat down on the stool, and he turned around and looked at me, and he said, "Where did you come from?" And I said, "Through the door." We left the place that night, and we were together after that.
Well, I married the love of my life. The Korean War broke out in 1950. My oldest brother, Donnie, and Kelly were good friends, and both belonged to the National Guard. They were stationed at Camp Rucker, Alabama. Whenever they had a 3-day pass, they would come back to Fergus and party at our home. The house was full of guys and gals, and a couple of the girls were my age. I was 14 and not allowed to be with them. I suppose because of drinking and having more fun. As I am going upstairs to go to bed, my dear brother Donnie bet Kelly a quarter that he didn't dare to kiss me goodnight. I never forgot that kiss. So, Donnie lost the bet. Anyway, long story short, I got married at 18, and I guess that was the story of my first love life and marriage.
Could she love? Could she would? Could she? Could she? Could she? Could? Has anybody seen my gal?
worked for the Regional Treatment Center for 20 years. And see, that was when rural schools had closed, so I had taken a position in the Regional Treatment Center, and so I started working there in 76. And
he worked at the hospital for 40 years, and I worked up there with the kids from school.
I graduated from high school in the spring and started spring of 52 and started September of 52 up at the state.
my mother worked up there too, and then brother and sister-in-law and his nephews.
Well, everybody had a, it was
relative
a
up there.
mainstay of working in it.
Best place in Fergus to work.
Yeah. I moved into the dorm because that was $30 a month for room and board, and you got your clothes washed, and it was really a pretty good thing for a single person. And I remember down in the tunnel, one section of the tunnel, they made sauerkraut, and there was barrel after barrel of sauerkraut. And if you get down, the prints are still in there with them barrels set. There was a ring where that vinegar or whatever would leak out of the barrels and stain the floor. I bet them rings are still there. But they had barrel after barrel along right under the kitchen it was. And when you walked through it, you could smell it. That used to be our main runway, is the tunnels. All the food was delivered, the laundry was delivered, everything was delivered through the tunnels. Pretty important highway. None of the stuff came overground that I know.
I think it was just like a little town.
Well, it was a city within the city, actually. We had everything in there. We had our own dairy, we had our own hog farm, we had our horses. We had our own butcher shop there. We butchered the hogs, and they wanted to butcher the cattle. They had milk. We had our own milk.
Baked everything
cream
too.
And so forth. They had our own
bakery.
A lot of our own vegetables.
And they baked
they'd raised
bread.
Acres of potatoes, I know. We had a great big farm.
Crops.
Raised our own garden. We had gardens, and
They had a cafeteria. They had a store.
and we had a library. We had a
just
beauty
everything.
shop.
Barber
Like I
shops.
said, we had
everything.
a movie theater.
Yeah.
We had a
Auditorium.
haberdashery where they could go get clothing. Outside we had what they called a tenny dance court.
A what?
Tenny dance, they call it. They played tennis out there.
Oh.
On certain nights they had evening dances, outside dances, and we had our own orchestra. Fick's Happy Ramblers it was called. Fick was an occupational therapist. The rest of the people that played in the band were all residents, played the polkas and the waltzes, and then of course they had inside dances in the auditorium, but in the summertime they'd have them outside if it was nice. But what's interesting, the people from downtown would come up just to watch the dancing, or listen to the music, And of course, if they wanted to dance, they could dance, Different orchestras would come in and play. That was back years ago.
But it was enjoyable.
It was really a big going place. That place was a good place for staff and residents, especially the residents. It was interesting, really interesting.
Yeah. It was pretty good.